Hello Mind Mappers and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be going over How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Donald Robertson. This book is packed full of wisdom coming from Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor, and Donald has done an amazing job at distilling some of the wisdom that Marcus Aurelius has shared with us and showing us how it can apply to our lives today. Some of the big problems in today's society, including procrastination, depression, distraction. The Stoics had great teachings and practices to overcome all of these things. After all, not much has changed other than the mediums that are distracting us, causing us procrastination, or even, for example, causing us to be unhappy. What I've done in this mind map, essentially, is pull out the big ideas from this book, including two of the big ideas that I think are the most important, so definitely stay tuned for those. The first quote that I pulled out from the book goes like this: "The Stoics can teach you how to find a sense of purpose in life, how to face adversity, how to conquer the anger within yourself, moderate your desires, experience healthy sources of joy, endure pain and illness patiently and with dignity, exhibit courage in the face of your anxieties, cope with loss, and perhaps even confront your own mortality while remaining as unperturbed as Socrates." Continuing on, he says, Marcus Aurelius faced colossal challenges during his reign as emperor of Rome. The Meditations provide a window into his soul, allowing us to see how he guided himself through it all. Indeed, I would invite you as a reader to put effort into reading this book in a special way, to try and place yourself in the shoes of Marcus Aurelius and look at his life through his eyes, through the lens of his philosophy. I recommend that you also approach this mind map in this video in the same way. Put yourself in Marcus's shoes as we go through some of the teachings that he's laid out here for us. Let's see if we can accompany him on the journey he made as he transformed himself, day by day, into a fully fledged Stoic. Fate permitting, more people may be able to apply the wisdom of Stoicism to the real challenges of everyday problems of living in modern life. However, that change won't leap off the page. It only comes by making a firm decision, here and now, to begin putting ideas like these into practice. It's a very powerful way to open up the book. And really what we're getting at here is why we could learn from the Stoics, why it might be important to learn from the Stoics, why a philosophy that is centuries old might be more applicable today than ever. For one, aside from being a truly dedicated and immersed Stoic, inside of that philosophy, the great Stoic teachers actually lived the principles and the exercises that they practiced. This is something that we don't always get today with academic researchers and writers. In fact, some of the books that were read on this channel already, you might notice that a few of the writers don't actually follow their words in the books. So it's definitely refreshing to hear from the Stoic teachers who not only spent their time thinking about the philosophy, but were of great standing in the real world. At the very least, Marcus Aurelius himself was in fact a Roman emperor. And this book is part biography, but it's also really a distillation of some of the best Stoic principles that can be applied to modern life. Donald Robertson, in my eyes, is not only a student of Stoicism, he lives the practices himself and is a trained psychologist to boot. Inside of this book and inside of his other books, he actually shows us how modern CBT mimics or borrows a little bit from some of the Stoic philosophies that we're going to read about here today. It's quite interesting. Inside the book, there are a ton of great strategies, exercises, and teachings coming from Stoicism. But to me, the first passage in and of itself shouldn't be overlooked. Placing yourself in the shoes of the person you are learning from is a great way to fully immerse yourself in the teachings. And speaking of that, immersing yourselves in the teachings of the mind maps that I create is the best way to learn. You can get the most out of the mind maps by following along. Find the process of how I mind map, including the modeling that Donald talks about here, plus all 50 plus mind map templates, including this one, are available down at the link below. Following along is going to help you learn more, remember better, and apply these books to your life. So I recommend that you don't wait. Go and pick up this mind map and follow along. And with that, let's move into our first point on nature. The schools of Hellenistic philosophy that followed the death of Socrates were often distinguished from one another in terms of their definition of the goal of life. For the Stoics, the goal is defined as living in agreement with nature, which we're told was synonymous with living wisely and virtuously. You can see this is a very long point, but I think it's important. Stoics argued that humans are first and foremost thinking creatures, capable of exercising reason. Although we may share many instincts with other animals, our ability to think rationally is what makes us human. Reason governs our decision. In a sense, the Stoics call it our ruling faculty. It allows us to evaluate our thoughts, feelings, and urges, and decide if they're good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. We therefore have the innate duty to protect our ability to reason and to use it properly. That's really what Stoicism is all about, is kind of sharpening that blade of reason that we have the ability to use. When we reason well about life and we live rationally, we exhibit the virtue of wisdom. Living in agreement with nature, in part, means fulfilling our natural potential for wisdom. That's what it means for us to flourish as human beings, fulfilling our natural potential for wisdom. The Stoics, therefore, took the name of philosophy, meaning love of wisdom, quite literally. They loved wisdom, or loved virtue, above everything else. If virtue sounds a bit pompous, the Greek word for it, arete, is arguably better translated as excellence of character. And you'll notice quite a lot in some of these old texts that we don't have really great translations. Some of the words for Stoicism and some of the words for Stoic, in fact, have been co-opted and mean something different today than they meant back then. Continuing on, we're going to say something excels in this sense if it performs its function well. Humans excel when they think clearly and reason well about their lives, which amounts to living wisely. The Stoics adopted the Socratic division of cardinal virtues into wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. The three virtues can be understood as wisdom applied to the social sphere, our relationships with other people. Displaying courage and moderation involved mastering our fears and desires, respectively, overcoming what Stoics called the unhealthy passions that otherwise interfere with our ability to live in accord with wisdom and justice. Courage, moderation, and overcoming these unhealthy passions. I can't think of anything more applicable to today's life. So what does it mean to really flourish as a human being? Well, if we look at what the Stoics believed, it's that our ability to reason is what really sets us apart as humans. They also believed that because we're naturally social animals, that we should use that reason to better our society. Marcus even once said, "Let your one delight and refreshment be to pass from one service to the community to another, with God ever in mind." So what does service to the community look like? Living a life of virtue is living a life of service to the community. Specifically, these four aspects of virtue, wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. These are the four aspects of virtue as classified by Socrates. Let's look a little bit more in depth to each one of these virtues and what it might mean. Wisdom allows us to make decisions that can improve our life and the lives of those around us. Courage is the ability to act well under challenging circumstances. Temperance makes it possible for us to control our desires and actions so they don't yield to excess. Justice refers to treating other human beings with dignity and fairness. And for me, I think that, again, those four virtues that are really the core tenets of Stoicism as laid out here in the book, I think that those are never more important than today. Wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. All things that we could all do with a little bit more of and practicing and sharpening our sword with. And speaking of that, we're actually going to move into one point that I think is maybe the best way to sharpen the sword. Your first step is to write down the virtues exhibited by someone that you respect. listing the qualities you most admire in another person, just as Marcus does in the first book of the Meditations, is a simple and powerful exercise. In addition to the virtues of real people, the Stoics were also known for contemplating the hypothetical character of an ideal sage, or a wise person. There are several passages where Marcus appears to be doing this. These descriptions inevitably seem a bit more abstract and grandiose. For example, he says that the perfect wise man is like the true priest of the gods, at one with divine element and reason of himself within himself. He is neither corrupted by pleasure nor injured by pain, and he remains untouched by insults. The true sage is like a fighter in the noblest of fights, dyed deep within justice. With his whole being, he accepts everything that befalls him, as assigned to him by fate. He seldom concerns himself with what others say or do unless it's for the common good. He naturally cares for all rational beings, as though they were his brothers and sisters. He is not swayed by the opinion of just anyone, but he gives special heed to the wise who live in agreement with nature. Again, that's kind of Marcus's view of this ideal sage, and I think we could literally copy and paste that, write that down in our own journals, and do very well to try and live up to that ideal sage that Marcus put centuries and centuries ago into his book Meditations. Marcus is trying here to describe human perfection to himself and envision the ideal sage who completely embodies the Stoic goals of life. In addition to asking ourselves what qualities the ideal wise person might have, we can ask what qualities we might hope to possess in the distant future. For instance, what sort of person would you hope to be after having trained in Stoicism for 10 or 20 years? Now, this is kind of two tricks of Stoicism, two strategies, I should say, of Stoicism stacked on top of each other. Something that Donald is very, very good at is making sure that we know that just because we aren't yet in the vision of that ideal sage doesn't mean that we can't be striving towards it in the long-term future. And what I would invite you to do is envision what your ideal sage might look like. For me, this is such a great, great exercise. I adopted it into my life immediately. As soon as I read this passage, I immediately adopted this. It's a great exercise for visualization, but also for self-reflection. Sure, sages will likely sound very similar between us. After all, we're probably after the most of the same base virtues, similar to the ones that we talked about before, similar to the ones that Marcus has laid out for us here. But your sage should be a true reflection of your best possible self, not of some specific ideal to uphold. These virtues, to me, at least, are principles and not standards. Now, there certainly is a hint of standard going on here in Marcus's description, but I think what you should look at is what's important to you. As Stoicism talks about here, you want to create virtues for yourself. And Stoicism offers some great ones here, but you can certainly add things, certain different virtues and qualities of the people in your life that you admire. So how best can we visualize our ideal sage? For me, asking questions is a really great place to start. Who are some of the people that I admire most in my life? What are some of the things that I admire most about them? And what might my life look like in 5, 10, or 20 years if I did my absolute best to uphold and cultivate those things that I admire in myself? It's such a great exercise that I actually decided to add it directly to my coaching program. This is one of the first things that we do with coaching clients, writing down what your ideal sage might look like. And what's the step after that? What do we do next? After we have this image of our ideal sage, what's the next logical step? Well, for me, it's journaling, another great Stoic practice. Given my ideal sage, ask yourself these questions at the end of the day. What did I not live up to today? How did I not live up to my ideal today? What did I live up to today, and what did I do well? I think a lot of times people imagine Stoicism as only kind of self-flagellating or looking down on yourself for not being the ideal version of who the Stoic in you should really be. But you also have to talk yourself up. You also have to say, I did this very well today. It's very helpful along the way. What could I do to make tomorrow a little bit different? In other words, how could I move slightly towards my ideal vision, my ideal sage tomorrow? Do you think this might benefit you? Click the link down below, sign up for a free coaching call, and we'll go over this ideal sage exercise together. Absolutely no obligation. I really enjoy talking to a lot of you mind mappers out there. It's as fun for me as it is for you. Click that link down below and let's create that vision of your ideal sage. Our next point here is about joy. Modern English, again, this is something we talked about before. Modern English isn't well equipped to capture some of the distinction made in Greek philosophy, especially when it comes to describing emotions and sensations. We use the word pleasure very broadly to encompass almost any positive feeling. However, the Stoics distinguish between the sort of pleasure, hedon, we get from external things like food or sex or flattery, and the deeper sense of inner joy, which is chara, that Marcus is talking about. Stoic joy is profound. It comes from achieving your fundamental goal in life and experiencing genuine fulfillment, which make ordinary pleasures seem trivial by comparison. Ordinary pleasures often ruffle our minds, especially when indulged in too much. Stoic joy never does this. It's synonymous with inner peace and knows no excess. The Stoics refer to it as having the pure form of joy that someone experiences who is living a truly great life and has attained genuine personal fulfillment, or eudaimonia. Of course, none of us are there yet, but all of us may potentially glimpse the goal as long as we're heading in the right direction. So 2 things before we move into my points here. Number 1, I think Donald is so good at dispelling that myth of we have to be living in a certain way, of putting expectations on ourselves. He does a very, very good job at showing that we can move slightly in the right direction, and that these virtues, these ideal sages that we create for ourselves are something to live up to, not something to beat ourselves up for not being currently. And I also think that what better to talk about today than the difference between the external things like food, sex, flattery, all the things that we think of as pleasure, and this inner sense of pleasure. I think most of the coaching clients that I talk to, really what we're trying to get at is this inner sense of joy. A lot of them are very successful. A lot of them run successful businesses or are successful in careers in their own right, but they feel like something is missing. They feel like they're experiencing wealth, they're experiencing abundance, they're experiencing pleasure in their day-to-day lives, but they just can't put their finger on what's missing. And to me, it's this chara, this stoic joy that a lot of us are missing by living up to our ideals and continually moving towards our virtues. So how can we experience true joy? This might be an exercise that I would do with one of my coaching clients. The Stoics would tell us that it's actually an active process. Instead of seeking out pleasures of food, sex, or flattery, true joy to the Stoic is a natural byproduct of living up to your virtues and contributing to society in a meaningful way. What's the best way to ensure that you're going to live a joyful life? Well, the ideal sage is a perfect example of someone in a state of true joy. And the ideal sage exercise is really the first place that you should start, in my opinion, simply because you need to know what you're living up to. Sometimes I'll find people and they don't have a belief system. They don't have virtues to live up to. So how can they possibly determine whether they're going to be able to move towards the things that they want to accomplish? Of course, they can't. It's kind of like setting out on a journey without a map. So the ideal sage is a really great way to create a map for yourself. Constantly and consistently living up to your virtues is the only way to live a life of joy. So it's the ideal sage exercise, and then cultivating the habits, cultivating the beliefs, cultivating the behaviors that are going to allow you to constantly and consistently move towards that ideal sage. Now, What if you're not living a life full of virtue right now? This might be some of you in this position right now. First of all, you're probably experiencing the effects of seeking out that short-term pleasure. It's great in the short term, but unfulfilling in the long term. As anyone who's been maybe addicted to food, as I have in the past, you know that at a certain point in time, the best tasting food in the world becomes unfulfilling. But you're kind of on this path of pleasure, continual pleasure. It's very difficult to step off. But me, as a person who has stepped off that kind of hedonic treadmill, as it's called, just know that it's much better on the other side. And if you're struggling with that or any other potential addiction to short-term pleasure, I want you to know that you can do it, and I want you to keep pushing through, and I want you to take that step off of that treadmill. Second, joy is available as part of the process. The Stoics believed not only in seeing where you could improve, but also where you were doing well, right? This is something that people I don't think understand. It's not just about beating yourself up. It's about seeing where you can improve, yes, but also where you're doing well. And then, as we're going to talk about in the next exercise, not having too much of an attachment to either one. So, how can you get a piece of this elusive Stoic joy? Start by moving towards your ideal sage. Make a small step today and congratulate yourself for it, and then work on being as unattached as you possibly can to either outcome, which is exactly what we're going to talk about in the big idea of 20 years. Another simple and powerful technique is to ask yourself how you would feel about the situation that worries you in 10 or 20 years' time, looking back on it from the future. In an example of a more general strategy known as time projection, in other words, you can help yourself develop a philosophical attitude towards adversity by asking, if this will seem trivial to me in 20 years from now, then why shouldn't I view it as trivial today instead of worrying about it as if it's a catastrophe? You'll often find that shifting your perspective in terms of time can change how you feel about a setback by making it seem less catastrophic. Now, I think that this time projection exercise is really, really great for not only the things that you're dealing with as far as adversity, as far as catastrophe, but also in dealing with the things that are going really well in your life. It's kind of this ability to be as detached from both sides of the equation as you possibly can to be able to continue to stay rational in your decision. So if you're dealing with adversity, this might be the perfect exercise for you. And adversity comes in all forms. It comes in temptation. It comes in hard work. It comes in social pressures. It comes in difficult decisions that you have to make. Time projection, to me, is a great way to put all of these things into perspective. And I invite you to try it for yourself. Think about what is currently stressing you out. And I know for a fact we're all here because we have something. Something is stressing us out. We're humans. It's part of the game. Pick one specific thing at a time. Don't think about all of the things stressing you out because this exercise will be more potent if you focus on the one thing. Fast forward in your mind 10 or 20 years into the future and look at that stressful point from there. Is it really still worth stressing about? Will you even remember this thing in 10 or 20 years from now? Will it still have had an effect on you, and will it be able to actually be used as a positive thing? Time for a little bit of a story about a time that I was dealing with great adversity. Recently, within the past couple of months, I lost a big contract in my marketing business. Immediately, I could feel my mind moving towards catastrophic thinking, worrying, stressing, even panicking. While I was reading this book, I tried this exercise. I realized that in 20 years, not only will this event not matter, in fact, I probably won't even remember it, but that it gave me a chance to become much better 20 years from now. I could use this adversity as a way to become a better marketer, a better business owner, a better human being. And what I did was I made a list of the 10 things that I could have done better to serve that client and immediately started executing on one of them. I find that writing down lists of 10 is an incredible exercise to help you overcome some things that you're dealing with in your life, whether it's I can't find new clients, whether it's I lost a client, whether it's I'm dealing with relationship troubles. Write down 10 ideas about how you could solve the problem that you're dealing with and go about trying to execute on only one of them. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's all well and good. Sometimes things are going great in my life and I'm not dealing with any adversity. How could I use this time projection in that case? Well, if something good happens, time projection can be used to keep you from getting a big head. So this is actually a big concept in Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, another book on Stoicism, which I've done a review on this channel. I recommend that you check it out. But what he says is that it's all about not getting a big head. All success is going to lead you to feeling bigger than you really are. But by looking forward in time, on even our biggest accomplishments, we can see how little they really might mean. And in fact, Ryan suggests that we do a meditation on our own death. So the amazing accomplishments that we've been able to accomplish and etc., what will they really mean when everything is turned to dust? What about the people that have come before us, that have accomplished great things? What does it mean to them? It allows you to keep your head on straight. It allows you to stay in the game and focus on what you can really accomplish, which is working hard and continuing to make rational, realistic decisions. It's a good way of keeping us grounded and keeping us moving forward. We can keep our pride, but we definitely don't want to have arrogance. That's going to cloud our judgments. Our final point here is about Hercules. I thank you for being with me here in the video, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. For me, this is my favorite point of the entire book, and I'm thankful for you guys for sticking around with me until the very end. What do you think Hercules would have amounted to, Epictetus asked his students, if there had not been monsters such as the lion, the hydra, the stag, or the boar, and all of those unjust and bestial men who contend with? Why, if he had sat at home, wrapped up asleep in the bedsheets, living in luxury and ease, he would have been no Hercules at all. Epictetus tells his students that just as Hercules cleansed the earth of monsters without complaining, they should set aside about conquering themselves by purging the base desires and emotions from their hearts. For Stoics, in other words, the tale of Hercules symbolizes the epic challenge of deciding who we really want to be in life, the promise of philosophy and the temptation of giving into pleasure and vice. The moral is that often requires a Herculean effort to keep the right path. But wasn't Hercules' life unpleasant? As we'll see from the Stoic perspective, Hercules remained cheerful despite the terrible things that he endured. He enjoyed a profound sense of an inner state of satisfaction, knowing that he was fulfilling his destiny and expressing his true nature. His life had something far more satisfying than pleasure. It had a purpose, something that I think we're all looking for. Choosing the right path, as Hercules did. This is a great example of how the Stoics use story and myth to prove a point. But what does it actually mean in our lives? Well, every day, probably even multiple times a day, we get to choose between two different paths, the same two paths that Hercules got to choose. The path of clearing the earth of monsters or the path of living in luxury. You know which one Hercules took, but which one have you been taking in your own life? And what if you don't have monsters in your life? Well, we call the things inside us demons for a reason. Everyone has to deal with the base desires and emotions that human beings all share. And how might this story of Hercules and his two different paths be useful for us? Well, maybe we could use Hercules as part of our ideal sage. Imagine every day how he chose the harder, more disciplined, braver, and more worthwhile path, even in the face of the worst possible adversity. How can you choose a path that has a little bit more adversity, but is more in line with your purpose today? How can you make a small move towards conquering some of the monsters that you have to contend with on a daily basis? Again, I want to thank you for being with me here today. How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Robertson. I recommend you pick it up. It's an amazing book full of timeless wisdom from Marcus Aurelius. I hope to see you in the next video.